Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. I am going on my weekly trip to Costco today. I'm going to fill up with some gas and get, honestly, just a few little things, anything that might just jump in the cart along the way. I thought I would make a video today talking about one of my favorite wrestling pay-per-views, one of my favorite wrestling shows that really got me into wrestling more than I was. I have memories of watching wrestling, whether it was Wrestling Challenge, Wrestling Superstars, on the weekends when they came on, and following along with wrestling. But I think a lot like a lot of kids, with pay-per-view back in the day, I never got to watch the pay-per-views when I was first getting into wrestling. You would have like that huge build-up, and then you'd have the commercial come on, call this number to get the show, $30, and you go running up to Dad and just basically be like, hey Dad, can we get the show? And him just basically be like, $30 for one night of television you're never going to be able to see again? No, not worth it. My dad, he was a great dad. He bought me a lot of video games. He always took me to all my baseball games. We had this, that, and the other. So it's not like I'm saying, by him not getting me these pay-per-views, he was a bad guy at all. But we never got to get him. And then all of a sudden, one day, one of his friends showed up who knew that I loved wrestling, and he said, "Hey, I ordered SummerSlam 1991 the other day, and I recorded it. Did you want to watch it?" And to me, my eyes just blew up that I knew somebody who was able to actually order the pay-per-view, and they were offering to lend me the tapes so I would be able to watch it and be up to date and not have to wait until the weekend to know everything that happened at SummerSlam. If you followed along in the magazines, you could honestly have to wait like 2 to 3 months before a WWF magazine came out with a rundown of what happened at SummerSlam in 1991. And then honestly, when Mean Gene Okerlund would jump on during, Wrestling Challenge and give you a wrestling update on what went down at the pay-per-view, you would honestly sometimes have to watch for a couple weekends to really know everything that happened at the SummerSlam, because they were still trying to sell the replay. They would show you enough to be like, oh man, maybe this is really worth watching it, and you order the replay, and you check it out that way, and then maybe the next weekend, then they'd just be like, fuck it, Hogan and Warrior won. But to be able to have those tapes, he never actually came to pick them up. I don't still have them, but probably until the last day that I was living at my dad's house, those VHS lived, and I watched them religiously. SummerSlam 1991, I believe, is one of the greatest wrestling pay-per-views of all time. Almost every single match on that card meant something, besides for the 2 tag team matches. I can honestly tell you, as a 10-year-old boy, I really believed in kayfabe, and I thought that the loser of the jailhouse match between the Big Boss Man and the Mountie was going to have to go to jail. And not in a skit that I honestly found out years later, was very sexual and had a lot of meaningful jokes in it that I did not understand as a child. Do you like leather? But I really believed it, and I was scared that the Boss Man was going to go to jail. I thought the Mountie had a chance to beat him. But when it all kicked off, the first match was a 6-man tag. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat tagged with the Texas Tornado and the British Bulldog. This match had a special meaning to me, honestly, because of the fact that I had a Hulk Hogan wrestling buddy, but my buddy Tommy, who lived down the street from my mom's house, he had like a whole gang of wrestling buddies. And we used to honestly get into it. Well, this sounds weird. We used to get into his bed, and we used to wrestle with those wrestling buddies a lot. We would have Royal Rumbles, we would have tag team matches, we would book pay-per-views. We got down with those wrestling buddies. I can honestly tell you the most matches we ever had, we wrestled as a tag team. I was the Texas Tornado. I love to do the Texas Tornado Punch. And he was the British Bulldog. I don't really know why, but we wrestled as a tag team of the British Texans. And to see them tag up in real life, even though Ricky the Dragon Steamboat just happened to be standing there with them, we thought that was really, really cool. And we thought maybe like WWF was listening to us book the territory back in the day. Bret the Hitman Hart went up against Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental Championship. This was the emergence of Bret the Hitman Hart as a singles wrestler, no longer having to be a member of the Hart Foundation. To me, as a kid, I thought that this singles push came out of the middle of nowhere, that he would be able to get this. I don't know how he earned it, how he became the #1 contender, if it was something on Primetime back at the time or something like that, but I was really surprised. But he stood up to Mr. Perfect, and it was one hell of a match. It might have been one of the first times in wrestling that it wasn't really like the lights, camera, action of wrestling. It wasn't like the Hulk Hogan promos that sold it for me. It was actually in the ring that I was like, man, this is fun. This is a really, really good match, and it showed different sides of Bret the Hitman Hart. He had, as a tag team wrestler, been a bad guy. He'd been a good guy. So I really never really knew where his alliance went down. But to see him sort of snap after the match was done and rip the singlet off the Mr. Perfect, I still don't really know what was going on there. Was there some sort of like bitter feud because of like they had some angle play up to this match? To me, honestly, it just sort of was like, boom, there it is. Bret won the Intercontinental Championship. I thought it was one hell of a match. I thought it was really, really good. But I never really knew what it meant to Bret. It was one of the first times that I ever saw an Intercontinental Champion rise from like a mid-card guy to being the WWF Champion. So that match meant more to me years down the road, to be able to say that I actually saw somebody. And in Bret the Hitman Hart's sake, a lot like Shawn Michaels, I saw them as tag team wrestlers. So I saw them like at the bottom of the card, when they were really scraping it to get going towards there. From there, we had the Natural Disasters. They went up against the Bushwhackers, really short match. And then that match ended with Andre the Giant, who was on the outside. He was hooking up with the Bushwhackers at the time. Earthquake and Typhoon started going after them. It wasn't until years later they were trying to plan an Earthquake versus Andre the Giant match for the next year's WrestleMania. They were trying to see if Andre the Giant had anything left in the tank. At that point, he was coming to the ring using like crutches, but they weren't like the crutches that you see like if you went to the doctor's office and you sprained your ankle or something like that. Still the weirdest crutches I've ever seen in my life. But maybe like for a guy that big, that's the only thing that they make. It honestly looked like they were made from like not tree stumps, because they're not huge, but I mean like long sticks from a tree. How they were able to hold him up at the time, I'm not sure. I've seen Andre's late matches that he had in Japan before he passed away. I don't honestly think WWF missed out on anything. I don't want to say it would have been wrestle crap if they would have done it, but I definitely think once you got Andre into the ring at that condition in WWF at a WrestleMania, it would have been something that a lot of fans would have wished they wouldn't have seen. I don't know if they just wanted to kill Andre one more time. I don't think at that condition he was going to beat somebody like Earthquake. It would have been 1992, I think, is when that match would have happened. So it's after the Hogan thing. So maybe Earthquake's not so untouchable. Maybe it couldn't have. But I don't know. I think it was a no-win situation. Legion of Doom ended up coming out and making the save. And I understand they were the new baby faces. They were going to be the babyface tag team of the territory. They were going to go on the cereal boxes. It just doesn't make sense to use up their pop earlier in the night when they're going to be fighting the Nasty Boys later on down the road in the card. We had the jailhouse match. Boss Man was able to get the win there. Mountie actually had a really good career in the WWF, but at the time, I didn't know who this guy was. He did his job. I really hated him, but I thought that he was going to be a flash in the pan, a guy that you saw here, and then we would never ever see him again. Of course, he would go on and Quebecers and have a really, really good run with that. But I can honestly tell you that I never knew that he was one of the Rougeau brothers. I honestly thought that they literally had a Mountie come from Canada and he was going to wrestle in the WWF. So it meant a lot to have him go up against the Boss Man, an American cop against a Canadian cop. What would have been, the Hart Foundation's 1997 run. What year was that? With them, they go to Canada, they're baby faces. They come to the States. They're the biggest heels in the world. There's nobody. Their alliances were wherever the home city was. The show, it ended with the match made in heaven and the match made in hell. The main event wrestling match of the night was the Ultimate Warrior against Hulk Hogan. No, I screwed that up. Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior teaming up. This would be the second time that we would see them team. The year before at the Survivor Series, they did a cool thing where they did the Ultimate Survival match, something that they had never done and they never did again. Each survivor from the Survivor Series matches would move on to a final match where it would be the heels against the baby faces. It was kind of like the first time I ever saw them draw the lines. Like, I knew these were the good guys, knew these were the bad guys, but I didn't know that the guys knew which side they were on. And, the good guys would all align with Hulk Hogan. The bad guys, they would all align with, I guess, Ted DiBiase was the main bad guy then on that team. He probably was the main event guy of his team. But, they would bring it back one more time to go up against Sergeant Slaughter and General Adnan, and I can't remember what they called the Iron Sheik, but he had some name to make him sound like he was Iraqi, even though he was coming out doing the bushwhacker walk. They all had the steel-tip boots given to him by Saddam Hussein. At that time, I was 10 years old. We watched the news, I guess, nightly. I'd watch the local news of NBC here. I don't know if it was as biased as it was then, but we were all, as kids, scared that we were going to get bombed by Iraq, living here in the United States, and the troops were over there, Desert Storm, fighting to keep us free. So it was easy for us to all hate Iraq because we didn't want to get hurt. We didn't want to get killed. We didn't want the soldiers to not come back to their families. But the match really isn't much of anything other than, Hogan and Warrior teaming up and beating these guys. This was 1991. So this is just after? It's just after WrestleMania 7. So Hogan has the belt. Hogan is the champion. Warrior's out there fighting with him. Yeah, because that would make sense because they wouldn't fire their champion. The big story that comes out years later is that was the Ultimate Warrior's last night working for the WWF until WrestleMania 8, when they have to bring him back because Hulk Hogan is retiring to go off to try and make movies in Hollywood. Warrior had a contract that he thought was just as good as Hulk Hogan's, but he wasn't getting the same paydays on dates, on the gates of houses, on merchandising, and he really wanted kind of like a 50-50 split with Vince because he thought that he was Sorry about that. I'm gonna have to fix that. I had my camera on the dash and it got too hot. But Ultimate Warrior, he wanted a 50-50 split with Vince on basically gates of houses, merchandise, and he came to Vince, basically saying that he felt that he was owed, I believe, $150,000, and he wasn't going to wrestle if Vince didn't give it to him. Vince had to scrape up the money, and he was able to give him the money so that he could actually go out and wrestle at SummerSlam 1991. And as the story goes, the second he came through the curtain at gorilla position, Vince fired the Ultimate Warrior. He had a fear that he couldn't have other wrestlers, I guess, holding him up for money, something that I guess wouldn't happen again until Jeff Jarrett did it. And that wasn't in your house, but it was the match against China. I can't remember what show it was. What the hell was that match? I almost called it the junkyard match, but it wasn't a junkyard. It was like stay in your kitchen match or something like that, where they were, beating each other with mops and brooms and stuff like that. And Jarrett lost the match to China, did the right thing, but then of course the next night was in WCW because his contract had expired, and for him to wrestle that one match, he could ask Vince for anything, and that's just basically what he did. But unlike with Demolition, everything is under the bridge now, and Jarrett is a Hall of Famer, even though he's not still with WWE. He's in AEW, but it is what it is. But it was a good match. It was fun. I guess there's more meaning to it now than there was back then. They finished off the night with the match made in heaven, which of course is the wedding of the Macho Man Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth on camera. They had been married, honestly, for their whole time in WWF. Macho Man, of course, after losing to the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania, he was forced to retire. He had just become like an on-screen commentator, so he was always constantly like in the loop. And this one night in Sacramento at a TV taping, he asked Miss Elizabeth, "Will you marry me?" And she said, "Ooh, yeah." So they had the wedding, and there's no real fireworks to the wedding. It is honestly just bring him out, wrestling entrance style. They have everything set up in the ring. They go through all of the I-dos. I don't remember Macho Man having like any babyface groomsmen. Miss Elizabeth didn't have any, wrestling bridesmaids. I don't know if this was just for their wedding album, or something like that. But the only fireworks actually came were if you ordered the Coliseum home video or you watched TV after the wedding ceremony. They are unwrapping presents, and one of the presents opens up, and it ends up being a cobra from Jake the Snake Roberts, which ends up setting up the next feud of Jake going up against the Macho Man Randy Savage this Tuesday in Texas, when they actually bring Macho Man back to wrestle. Undertaker is involved in this, even though Undertaker will soon turn on Jake the Snake and become a babyface, which sets up their match for WrestleMania. So a lot to see here. So it's my favorite show. Probably what really deep dive me deeper into wrestling, to then consistently renting VHS tapes from Blockbuster. Anytime we were able to go there, it was always renting a Royal Rumble or a SummerSlam. I would always see those NWA tapes, but I never pulled the trigger on renting them because I didn't really recognize everybody on the box cover. It wouldn't be until years later that I actually got into the NWA WCW stuff. But that's about it. SummerSlam 1991. I still think it's one of the best shows. I've covered it here on the channel before, but damn good stuff.